How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the film review, episode number 112. This is our special year-end review where we talk about the best movies that came out in 2012. I got two special guests for you. This is Mr. Joel Pabst on my left and Sir Bryan Zelasko on my right. So what we're going to do basically is we're going to go through our list. First, we're going to list off some honorable mentions that we have. Movies that were really, really good but didn't make our list for one reason or another. And then we're going to talk about our movies that are on our list, and you'll see on the screen our numbers, like where it is on our list, so that we don't have to be like number 1, number 5. So I think we can just keep doing it. So Joel, why don't we start with you? What were some of the movies that were pretty awesome but didn't quite make your list? What would you say are some of the ones you did?
Well, Mr. Zagutis, I had 10 other movies that didn't make my list. Just because it was a really good year and a lot of stuff that I liked a lot. A couple that I really liked were Perks of Being a Wallflower, which is one of my last ones I saw. I like Magic Mike, Avengers. I won't go through all of them. Chronicles one.
Yeah.
That was really good. I still have to tell people, say Chronicle, if you didn't see that movie, it's
pretty awesome for a February movie.
Yeah. And just for something that's a found footage movie, you know, they do that stuff and it's so burned out nowadays, and they really put it back in Leonardo DiCaprio's son.
Yeah, right.
Two honorable mentions. The first honorable mention will be Avengers. It just missed my list. And then the second one would be Tim and Eric's $1 billion movie, which is a masterpiece of cinema.
Yes.
I think so.
Taquito. Yeah, that was in my top 5.
The finest meats.
The finest softest meats.
Yes.
No, that was in my top 5 till like July. There was nothing I'd seen the year that I like loved.
Yeah, you're like, and then it's still on the list.
Right. I had like 6 honorable mentions, and these were movies that like I did really, really love, but they just didn't make my list. The couple that I did have were 21 Jump Street, which I think still is probably the funniest movie I've seen this year, but somehow didn't make my list. That was barely. Magic Mike was one that probably one of the bigger surprises for me for the year, just because it's a male stripper movie, and I'm not really demographic for that, and I did really enjoy it quite a bit. I'm not, actually. I also have Perks of Being a Wallflower on my honorable mentions, one of the better coming-of-age teen dramas recently.
Definitely, because I mean we don't really get a lot of those nowadays. I mean, everything we do is just another like ABC.
I'm so emo kind of crap, yeah.
Yeah.
But really, really like strong coming-of-age drama.
It wasn't my high school, but it was close.
No.
I didn't go to
they had better music in Perks than they did when we were in high school.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Another one, I will also say The Avengers was an honorable mention, and I bet we've pissed off a lot of Marvel fanboys by not putting it on our lists. But it is pretty awesome. Joss Whedon goodness. Also, The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey was an honorable mention for me. One that I didn't expect was I lowered my expectations after the reviews, but I did really enjoy the movie quite a bit. It really took me on a journey. And the one that killed me to take off my list, it would be number 11 if we were doing a top 11, but that was Lincoln, Spielberg's best movie, I think, since Munich. But just missed the cut.
After the review.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to start off we're going to go in alphabetical order of the movies that are on all of our top 10s. So we're going to start off with 21 Jump Street, which was an honorable mention for me, but it made it onto these guys' list. So how did 21 Jump Street make it so high on your lists?
Well, it made it on our list in the first place, I think.
Right.
Because you know the ones that you thought were better. I mean, for me it was best comedy of the year. It's a movie I laughed the most in, and I wasn't expecting a whole bunch when I first heard about it. And
yeah,
I think for me when it comes to genre movies, and every movie's kind of a genre, but whether it's, I'll talk about this a little more too later on, but musicals, horror movies, sci-fi, you kind of look for that niche for it. So, you know, comedy, I want to laugh.
Yeah.
But for the ones that really transcend are the ones that do that thing so well, but also have a story that I'm interested in, maybe have like a heart to it. I thought this did those things for it.
Oh, absolutely.
In terms of movies that stuck with me throughout the year, I mean, yeah, I can think of movies I didn't put on my list that you could say are better filmmaking. But I'm like, I enjoyed it a lot.
Yeah.
I wouldn't like not put it on my list for that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Joel there. I think that it was a great comedy. I think it was a nice surprise, and the reason why it ended up where it ended up on my list is because I rewatched it and I still laughed as hard as I did when I saw it the first time. I think I've seen it 3 times now. The first 2 were when it came out, and then the third time just recently. So it was it was a really nice surprise, and I think it'll still hold up, and it'll be one of those movies we talk about and like, hey, you want to like watch that?
Oh yeah,
and like
definitely.
quote it all the time.
Yeah, I mean, in this, it really was very hard for me not to put this one on my list because I can't think of another comedy this year where I literally laughed like every single minute of the movie. We did really all enjoy it. It is one of the funniest. I'm actually really looking forward to the sequel that they're gonna do.
Yeah.
Which I think is coming out. I think 2 years from now.
Is it going to be basically like the sequel to Breaking Bad?
Breaking Bad.
Close enough,
Breaking
super
Bad.
bad because they were into a college of that.
I guess
Maybe
so, pretty much.
they'll like move them together.
So next one on our list is Ben Affleck's third directorial debut.
It's kind of like that.
His third directing debut. His third film,
Do we
Argo.
not want to count the other two?
Argo, which you have not seen yet, which you should.
I will.
Argo is just a really solid, all-around, really great movie. I think. Just in terms of everything, it's like one of the most entertaining movies I've seen. It's really does a great job of being like suspenseful, like really building up suspense, especially in that climax. Plus, also, it's really funny too. It's in like the Hollywood scenes, but it doesn't feel jarring at the time, which I would think it would. But I think Ben Affleck did a really good job directing it, and it's actually one of his better performances that he's given in his career.
Yeah.
Because I've never really been that big of a fan of him as an actor.
No, I mean not unless it's like a Kevin Smith movie, but I mean,
Right, yeah.
But
Minus
those
Jersey
are his
Girl.
best. Those are his
Yeah.
best.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I'll say that too. I mean, it was, you kind of see with Gone Baby Gone, Town of This, just like his directing getting a little bit better each movie.
Yeah.
He knows people to work with, and I think it was good. Did a great ensemble cast. And movies that, there's a couple other ones on this list. You'll see that like I heard that it was this great movie, and like I'm like it's gonna be whatever, and I was just like, so even though I kind of knew, okay, I know how it ends because I heard the story a little bit, what it's based on. You know, I was into it the whole time through. It paced well.
Mhm.
It was one of those movies where I could see someone saying, yeah, it was just a really good, you know what's going to happen movie or solid movie. But I'd say, yeah, but it just was done so I just really enjoyed it. I ended up seeing it. I did end up seeing it a second time. That was one of the reasons why I did stay on my list. I think I left it pretty high up, but
Yeah. So the next movie on the list, I believe, this is the only one that was. I was the only one that had this on my list. Was The Cabin in the Woods, which normally this is so rare for me to put a horror movie on my list, but it's freaking Cabin in the
Dude, he
Woods.
doesn't like scary movies.
Yeah, I never really liked scary movies just because I don't really like being scared. But Cabin in the Woods is pretty much like one of the craziest, most insane movies and original movies I've seen this year, and it's just so much craziness. It's really funny also. Like I'd actually say it's more funny than scary, but that's not a problem for me. Some other people might have been disappointed with that going into it, but I didn't really mind that it wasn't that scary. I just felt like it was such a great comment on the horror genre as a whole and how we watch horror movies and why they're like this, and just the last 20 minutes or so are just some of the most insane 20 minutes I've ever seen in any film, and those last 20 minutes alone would have guaranteed a spot on this list, but the rest of the movie is just really rounded out by really good performances, really good writing, and just really, really clever original work from Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard.
yeah, Goddard.
Goddard, yeah.
No, actually, I really like this one. Was it Joseph's my list? I think like the opening 2 minutes of the movie. I remember I was in the theater, and for those of you who have seen the movie, this is this kind of opening that basically tells you this is not the movie you think you're going to go see.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, I love it right here. And that last 2 minutes is great. And that's what it is. You can't almost, I would tell anyone else, don't watch any previews on this because there's a lot of things in the movie that get spoiled. And you don't look at this movie as like, it's trying to put itself out there as this basic kind of horror movie, but this isn't the best example, but I would say think of movies like Shaun of the Dead is one example of like movies that they're horror movies, but they're not really, they're more about something else different. So don't think of it just as this boring slasher movie. It's really funny. It's kind of, I mean, it's scary and like thrilling points, but it's more of a commentary.
And it's super, super meta, if I can use
Very,
the word.
very.
Meta.
I usually use that word,
M-E-T-A.
but yes, I'll allow you to say
I
that.
still need a dictionary for that one.
It's okay. We'll look it up when we get home.
Okay. So the next movie on our list is probably the biggest blockbuster of the year, and that was The Dark Knight Rises. I was very surprised at the response to this movie. Like, so many people were like disappointed with this movie, or were like, "There's a million plot holes," and how did he get back into Gotham? I'm like, he's freaking Batman. and he's Bruce Wayne.
Yeah,
He can find a way. And I think ultimately why this is so high on my list, simply because it's just such a great conclusion to what I think is probably one of the best, if not maybe the best blockbuster trilogy of our time. One of them, at least. And it was so satisfying, and just the performances were all great. It was very big, epic scope. Like the action scenes, like IMAX, especially in IMAX, they looked incredible. And it just worked for me so well. And also, it was so emotionally, I think I really got into this, and it's so high, because it was so emotionally resonant for me. Probably the most out of all three of Nolan's Batman movies. But it's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, not to be a geek boy with it. I mean, for me too, is on my list very high, because I like Batman. I'll watch any of them, even Schumacher's movies. I mean, I would say those are good movies, but I enjoy those stories, and it did the whole thing as creating the whole trilogy. I mean, I remember the first time I didn't walk out of it, I had this sort of weird feeling of like,
that wasn't what I wanted.
Yeah, and also like, well, now life is complete, because I just don't want to live in a world without these characters anymore. I can go and die now. But it was like, in seeing it a couple more times, the movie you have to see viewings, because there's a lot that happens in it, and it really wrapped up everything. The scope, the IMAX, seeing in IMAX too, we saw it twice.
Yeah,
IMAX.
within a 24-hour time span.
Yeah, we lost our minds. But I mean, it was just
IMAX too.
Everything along with it, and also too, the parents of Avengers. I remember I had friends that I know a handful of people I talked to, like, yeah, I think I was more entertained by Avengers, but I thought Dark Knight Rises had a better story. But I'm not going to get on that defense with it. But like I said, I like Batman. I was really enjoyed by it. It did the scope that I was looking for. Over a few viewings to it increase for me, which is one of the things I look for movies, if they stay the same or increase. And did I also too? I said people try to compare it with the second one. Yeah, I liked 2 better the first time I saw it than I did this one. But over time, I've seen this as probably a slightly better made film.
Yeah.
Than that was, and it created the whole trilogy. And I'd say best trilogies of the past decade would probably be this, Lord of the Rings, and Toy Story.
I really liked it too. As many of you may or may not remember, I did not like the previous one for a multitude of reasons.
Very controversial.
Yes,
Very controversial.
Yes, the controversial one. But I really enjoyed this one because I enjoyed the concept of, well, sort of the whole middle, like what would happen if we lost all society. I thought it was an accurate portrayal about what I've read and what you might think. And I liked the story. I mean, Anne Hathaway wasn't bad to look at.
She was great too, just an amazing Catwoman.
Yep.
And Tom Hardy as Bane was like fierce and just
I
really
do miss the other
intimidating.
Bane,
And the grunt. The idiot.
No, I mean, some people have said before, one of the best things, if you don't get why some people like him a lot, or it's like, it's poor performance, it's all through his voice and his eyes, and there's scenes in that movie where some things you don't notice it, but there's other points, especially after, spoiler for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, when
Spoiler alert.
in the middle section of the movie when he's talking to Batman, Bruce Wayne-ish, at the time, and he has this conversation with him, kind of setting him up for some of the events in the rest of the movie, and just his eyes throughout that whole minute conversation they have, and just throughout you see him. I mean, but if you guys want to have a video review, if you want me to defend things, we'll do that.
It will take 3 hours.
If we have
More
enough requests, we will do it.
for more ice cream.
And Jack just wanted to say that Michael Caine made him cry.
I didn't know he had eyelids, but
Next one going down is the latest film from Quentin Tarantino, that is Django Unchained. It just was a blast to watch. Not counting Death Proof, but even his weaker movies, ones that I'm not as crazy about, are still like a ton of fun to watch, because he's just such an original filmmaker, and just he really knows his way around dialogue and staging different unique ways of doing action scenes and all that. And Django, it's like, this is exactly like what I pictured a Tarantino spaghetti western to look like. But I also really liked about the movie, the performances are all great, especially Leo DiCaprio and Samuel L. Jackson. Probably my 2 favorite performances from that movie. Very intimidating and funny at the same time. But I also really liked that Tarantino didn't shy away from the horror and brutality of slavery, which he brings up a good point. It's like, we haven't really gone, like, a lot of American movies haven't really gone into slavery. We've kind of brushed over that.
Because we're afraid.
Well, we're kind of ashamed of that. But Tarantino's not afraid to face it head on, and there's some stuff in there that's some pretty brutal violence, but it does really work for the time period.
I really liked it too. Inglourious Basterds was sort of one of those movies where I watched it too many times, and so now I can't watch it. So, looking back on that, Django, as he said, was sort of fun and it was a blast, which is really funny to say about, moving about slavery.
I know, right?
It was a blast, man.
It's a blast.
Yeah,
man.
slavery is so much
Slavery.
fun, man.
I mean, what's there to argue about? Free labor.
Yeah.
And I also felt it was not as Tarantino-y dialogue-wise
Yeah,
as
I'd
it
say, yeah.
can be.
I think that's also too just in terms of the times that it takes place in, like the 1850s. You can't really. It'd be so weird if all of a sudden they started talking about like Fu Manchu or something.
No,
like
he
that.
just have a monologue about like churning butter.
Or something like that.
Now, my mother, if she wants to churn butter the correct way, we have to. And you know what it's like when it's that? It's the thickest, purest butter you will ever have. And then the shootout happens.
Right.
But he's like, that was in the extended
German.
cut.
Yeah.
I mean, for me, it wasn't on my list, and that's partially because I've just kind of grown out of him over the years. I think he's a great writer, great director. I was entertained. This is definitely one of the high honorable mentions of the year for me. For the length of the movie, it really paced well, great performances. I think Christoph Waltz was really like the heart of the movie because I wasn't.
Yeah.
Because for me, at first, when I knew he was in the movie and knew he was a good guy, I thought he was basically going to be the same character in Inglourious Basterds, just a good guy. But
No,
he actually
he's
has a part in it.
Yeah.
I don't know. For me, in terms of why I didn't, I think when it comes to that point in the movie, you're like, oh, it's got 5 or 10 minutes left, and it's got 30 minutes left, actually.
Right.
That sort of third act
It
to it.
throws you off the first.
It's not the pace that threw me off. I was fine with it. I was kind of warned about it, so I knew it was like this epicness to it. It's like when it got to that point, I knew exactly where the story was going to go, so it was kind of like, as soon as Tarantino
Which goes against
surprised me,
Yeah.
that kind of takes away. And like I said, some of my wore out things is, some critics use the idea of he's like sometimes like a 5-year-old with a hammer.
Yeah.
And that's the thing is like I enjoy action violence in movies. Sometimes the exploitation gets to points where it's like, okay, I agree, slavery's messed up and he should show it, but there's other stuff where it's like, well, now I'm going to justify showing an extremely bloody shootout for the other. So I mean, that's my own self. Everyone, this stuff I will say I was entertained. It was one of my almost misses of the year.
Yeah.
But
And I will, just to throw in one last thing, Tarantino has the worst Australian accent I've ever heard.
Oh yeah,
in my entire life.
he does. I was like,
what are
is
you
that
talking about?
It's a Southern Australian
I was
accent.
like, what's wrong with his voice?
Mhm.
But
I don't want to eat told Becky. I'm like,
He,
okay.
he also doesn't have a good haircut in the movie.
And he looks fat.
Oh, and
Yeah,
Jonah Hill's
O'Donnell.
also awesome.
doesn't he? He looks like Rosie
A
O'Donnell.
little bit.